He didn't call. Not a message, not a word. I told myself he was busy, that maybe he'd surprise me later. But the next morning, I found out he hadn't forgotten everything, just the part that didn't pay. He didn't call. Not a message, not a word. I told myself he was busy, that maybe he'd surprise me later. But the next morning, I found out he hadn't forgotten everything, just the part that didn't pay. Birthdays used to mean noise in this house. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of my wife's chocolate cake cooling on the counter. She'd bake it every year, pretending she'd forgotten the recipe, though she never did. Now the only sound was the slow ticking of the clock, mocking the silence that had become my companion. I turned 70 that day. 70, a number that sounds heavy when you say it out loud. My wife was gone for 5 years. My son Adam had moved across the state. He said the city offered him a better life. Maybe he was right. The last time I saw him was at his wedding, a beautiful ceremony full of smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. That morning I woke up early, shaved, carefully, even put on the dark blue sweater he'd bought me years ago. I waited. I brewed coffee for 2, though there was only me. Each hour stretched longer than the one before it. Noon came, then evening. Still nothing. Around 7, I checked my phone again. No missed calls, but one message blinked at the top of the screen. Not from Adam, from my lawyer. John, just confirming our meeting tomorrow morning about your estate plan. Let me know if you'd like to make any adjustments. Estate plan. That phrase had a strange way of sounding more alive than I felt. I sighed and looked at the framed photo on the mantel, the 3 of us. Maria's hand rested on my shoulder. Adam standing tall between us, his arm around her waist. We were younger, simpler. I used to think love could outlast disappointment, but as the candles on my untouched slice of cake melted into wax, I realized love is not a promise. It's a memory that needs feeding. At 9, the phone finally rang. My heart jumped, but it wasn't his voice. It was the bank. Mr. Miller, this is a courtesy call. Your son Adam Miller was added as an authorized contact on your secondary account. Just confirming you approved this update. My hand froze mid-air. No, I said slowly, I didn't. The woman hesitated. Oh, I see. He provided documentation, said it was pre-approved by you. My chest tightened. I could almost hear Maria's voice in my head, calm but stern. Don't let kindness make you blind, John. After I hung up, I stared at the old wooden desk where my papers sat. The inheritance folder was right there inside the top drawer. I'd told Adam about it once, that after I was gone, everything I built would be his. He'd smiled back, then said, "You're not going anywhere, old man." Maybe that was the only truth he'd told. I sat by the window as rain began to fall, the quiet kind, soft but relentless. I thought about calling him, to ask why, to demand an answer, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered to the empty room, "Happy birthday, John." Somewhere in that stillness, I realized something that stung more than the betrayal itself. I had raised a son who valued what I'd leave behind more than what I still had to give. When I finally turned off the lights and lay in bed, a strange calm replaced the hurt. The kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from clarity. Tomorrow I would meet the lawyer, and I would rewrite everything. The next morning smelled of rain and coffee. The kind of morning that feels cleaner than it should, as if the sky is trying to rinse away what people can't. I dressed in silence, buttoning my shirt carefully, and slipped the worn leather folder into my coat pocket, the one that held everything. Adam once said he didn't want to think about Will's deeds and numbers that meant nothing until someone dies. My lawyer, David Hartman, had been with me for 20 years. He was one of those men who aged gracefully. Silver hair, steady hands, voice calm as water. When I entered his office, he looked up with that polite smile of his. "John," he said, standing to shake my hand, "happy late birthday." I smiled faintly. "You remembered? That makes one of us." He frowned, sensing something. "Adam didn't call." I shook my head. "No call." But he remembered the inheritance. David blinked. He sat down slowly. "That explains the documents he sent yesterday." "What documents?" I asked, my stomach tightening. He turned the screen toward me, a scanned set of forms with my signature forged almost perfectly. My eyes moved over each page. Power of attorney, account access, property deed transfer. All signed. All dated last week. "He came in personally," David said softly. "Told my assistant you'd approved everything, but were too ill to come in. He even brought medical paperwork." I let out a quiet breath. Medical paperwork. "Yes. A doctor's note stating you've been under neurological treatment, something about memory decline." For a moment, I couldn't even feel anger. Just a cold emptiness. A son preparing to inherit from a man who hadn't even left yet. I leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on the rain streaking down the glass. "Tell me, David, what happens when your own child kills you before you're dead?" He said nothing. Just watched me the way people watch a man, realizing something he can't unlearn. After a long silence, I spoke again. "Undo it all. Every authorization. Every access. I want new documents, new witnesses, and a clause he'll never expect." David nodded slowly. "You mean—" "Yes," I said. "I'm changing my will. But this time he'll have to earn what he wants. Not with blood, but with truth." We spent the next 2 hours drafting new conditions. The rain outside grew heavier, matching the rhythm of my thoughts. Each clause was a mirror, a reflection of the years I'd tried to give him: love, patience, forgiveness. All the things that never made it into a bank account. Before leaving, David looked at me carefully. "Are you sure, John? Sometimes resentment can blind us." I smiled faintly. "This isn't resentment, David. It's remembrance." When I stepped outside, the city was quiet. I walked past a bakery window. The smell of warm bread, the sound of laughter inside. For a second, I saw a father with his teenage son sharing a slice of cake, the boy's face lit up by joy. I looked away. On the bus ride home, I thought about Maria again. She'd always said, "A man's true birthday isn't when he's born. It's the day he learns why." Maybe today was that day for me. That evening, I received another message, this time from Adam. Just 5 words. "Hey, Dad. Need to talk tomorrow." No apology. No mention of the day before. Just business disguised as concern. I stared at the message, then typed back, "Sure. Come by the house at noon." As I hit send, I realized something almost poetic. The son who forgot my birthday was about to walk into the lesson I'd been saving all year. The doorbell rang at exactly noon, punctual as always. Adam had my habit of being on time, though, for different reasons. I walked slowly to the door, my cane tapping softly against the wooden floor. When I opened it, he stood there with a practiced smile, holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of pastries. "Hey, Dad," he said, too casually. "Shanley, brought you something." I nodded, studying his face. 32 years old, well-groomed, the faintest stubble shaped with care. The kind of face that once used to laugh easily, but now hid behind convenience. "Come in," I said quietly. He stepped inside, setting the bag on the table. The smell of cinnamon filled the room, a clever choice. Maria's favorite scent. "You've been okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "You busy? Work's been crazy. You know how it is?" He didn't ask about my birthday. Didn't even glance at the half-melted candles still sitting on the counter from the night before. "I meant to call," he added quickly, noticing my silence. "It just slipped my mind, with the project and all." Of course I interrupted, pouring coffee into 2 cups. People forget things. Some just forget faster than others. He looked at me, trying to read the tone, but I gave him none. We sat. The air was thick, the kind that carries unspoken truths. He talked about work, about a big opportunity that could change his life if he could just get a little financial cushion. I listened, nodding occasionally. Every word was another brick in the wall he was building between us. Then, as if it had been waiting in his throat the whole time, he finally said it. "Dad, I wanted to talk about your accounts. I know you've got a lot of assets just sitting there, and I thought maybe I could help manage some of it. Take the load off you." There it was, not even disguised anymore. I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. "Manage? That's a big responsibility." "Yeah, but I've been learning a lot. Investments, taxes, estate stuff, you'd be surprised." I murmured. "And what about birthdays? Any learning there?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Birthdays," I said again, calm and quiet. "Did you learn to forget those too?" The silence that followed was louder than shouting. He opened his mouth, closed it again. His hands fidgeted with the coffee mug. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I really am. It just slipped." "Don't apologize," I said, setting my cup down. "Forgetting happens. Sometimes it just tells us what matters most." For a moment, guilt flickered in his eyes, small, quick. almost human, but it vanished as soon as I mentioned the will. I've been thinking, I said slowly, about my estate. David's been updating the paperwork. That got his full attention. Yes. I realized I should make things simple. Maybe leave things to the person who truly remembers me when it counts. He smiled, a flash of teeth that looked too bright against the dim room. That's good, Dad. You deserve peace of mind. I smiled back, not out of warmth, but out of understanding. The wolf had mistaken the shepherd's silence for weakness. As he talked, I noticed his eyes wander to the study door, to the desk drawer, where the old folder used to be. He was looking for it without even realizing it. Instinct, not love, guided his gaze. When he finally left, he hugged me, quick, rehearsed, weightless. "Love you, Dad," he said, the words like currency he no longer valued. The door closed behind him, and I stood there for a long time, staring at the space he'd occupied. The house smelled of cinnamon and deceit. That night, I took out a new notebook, Maria's old leather one, and began to write. Not for him, for me. If a man measures love by what he receives, he'll spend his life counting losses. But if he measures it by what he gives, no one can steal from him. As I wrote those words, I realized something simple and terrifying. My son hadn't just forgotten my birthday. He'd forgotten who he was raised to be. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I reminded him. 3 days after Adam's visit, I called him. Not because I missed him, but because silence had done its job. It was time for the next step. "Hey, son," I said, my voice softer than usual. "I've been feeling off lately. Might need some help around the house." There was a pause, not of concern, of calculation. "Oh, sure, Dad. I can come by this weekend, maybe bring some groceries. You okay?" "I'll manage," I said. "Don't trouble yourself too much." No, it's fine," he replied quickly. "I'll be there." The lie was polite, but it still stung. That weekend he came not with groceries, but with his laptop and a folder of investment proposals. "If you're not feeling well," he said, settling on the "you should probably let someone help with the paperwork. I could even handle the online banking, just temporarily." I nodded, pretending to think. "You're right. Maybe that's best. But I'd like to show you something first." From the drawer, I pulled out Maria's old recipe box, worn wooden, and held together by years of sugar dust and tape. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Your mother's recipes," I said. "She always said every family recipe hides a story." He opened it impatiently. "Dad, I'm not really into—" "Read the first card," I said quietly. He sighed and read aloud. "Chocolate birthday cake. 2 cups of sugar. 1 of regret." He stopped, realizing it wasn't a recipe at all. "What is this?" I smiled faintly. "Her handwriting. She wrote those after you moved out. Said she'd rather leave you sweetness than silence." He closed the lid, uncomfortable. "That's nice, Dad. But listen," I interrupted him again. "Adam, do you remember the last time we baked this together?" He hesitated. "I was maybe 12, 14. I corrected. "You wanted to surprise your mother. You burned half the cake and blamed the oven." She laughed. "For a week." He chuckled. awkwardly, eyes drifting away. That moment, that flicker of genuine memory, was all I needed to see that there was still a trace of the boy he used to be. But like a candle in the wind, it didn't last. He leaned forward. "Dad, about those accounts." I nodded slowly. "Of course. Let's talk about them." His eyes brightened. I took out a folder, not the real one, but a decoy. Inside were false copies, modified titles, meaningless numbers. I slid it across the table. "Everything you need is there." He grinned. "You trust me with this?" "I do," I said softly, completely. And that was the truth, because trust, when offered to the wrong person, reveals more than betrayal ever could. After he left, I sat in the quiet again, watching the sun crawl across the floorboards. Maria used to say, "Love is patient, but patience is not love." I was learning the difference. That evening, David called. "You sure you want to go through with this, John? It's a risky way to find out the truth." I stared at the fake folder on the table. "I'm sure. A son who steals is sad, but a father who never teaches is worse." Over the next few days, I pretended to grow weaker, left my cane by the door, walked slower, answered calls with a faint voice. And like a clockwork pattern, Adam came more often, always with that same smile, always leaving with questions about my updated accounts. But one night, while he thought I was asleep, I heard him in the study. The rustle of papers, the soft click of the safe, the deliberate quiet of a thief. I didn't move. I just listened. Every second was another nail in the coffin of the man I once believed he could be. When he left, I rose slowly, went to the window, and watched his car disappear into the dark. The moonlight caught the edge of Maria's photo on the wall. Her eyes seemed to ask me the question I'd been avoiding. "When will you stop forgiving him, John?" I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I knew one thing. The test wasn't over. Tomorrow he'd come again. And when he did, the lesson would begin. The next time Adam came over, he didn't knock, he just let himself in. That small detail said everything. "Dad," he called, out stepping into the living room. "You okay?" I stayed quiet a moment longer than necessary, just enough to make him uneasy. Then I answered, voice low. "In here, son." He found me in the study, pretending to be tired, my reading glasses hanging loosely from one hand. "You should be resting." He said the words automatic. "I will," I replied. "Just wanted to go over a few things with you." He smiled faintly, pulling out a chair beside me. "Sure. I actually brought some forms that might make things easier. For you. I mean," he set a neat stack of papers on the desk. I glanced at them. Transfer requests, account consolidations, authorization signatures. Every line dressed in the language of help. "This will let me handle your payments, property, taxes, all that stuff," he said confidently. "Just to make sure you're comfortable." I studied his handwriting, deliberate, neat. It reminded me of when he was in school. He used to write birthday notes for his mother, signing them with too many hearts. Now he signed only where it profited him. "Adam," I said slowly, Do you remember the house in Oregon? He blinked, thrown off. The one you sold years ago? Yes. I built that place with my own hands. You were 6. You helped me carry nails, though half ended up in your pockets. He smiled awkwardly. Yeah, I remember. I nodded. And when it was finished, your mother said something. Do you remember that? He shook his head. She said, a house is built with wood, but a home is built with memory. He shifted, impatient. That's nice, Dad. But listen, about the forms. I placed a trembling hand on his. I'll sign them tomorrow, after I have had time to think. Relief washed across his face like sunlight through thin clothes. Sure, Dad, take your time. But as he packed his folder, I caught the gleam in his eyes, the kind men get when they believe the battle is already won. When he left, the silence wrapped around me like an old coat. The same kind Maria used to wear when she'd sit by the window watching storms roll across the sky. I whispered to her picture. He's almost there, love. Almost ready to see himself. That night I sat at my desk and began writing a letter. Not for Adam, for the lawyer, for the world that would come after the truth. Dear David, if you're reading this, then my son has done what I feared he would. Don't stop him. Let him believe he's succeeded. I've transferred every account into a trust under your control. But here's the condition. The trust releases only if he fulfills one thing, a single request. I'll record tomorrow. He won't expect it. That's the point. I don't want revenge, David. I want revelation. John Miller. The next morning I rehearsed my weakness, left my cane near the door, walked slower, forgot things deliberately. Even the way I spoke became softer, less certain. If deception was a sin, then maybe mine was holy, born not from greed, but from grief. When Adam returned that afternoon, he looked almost concerned. Almost. Dad, you okay? You look tired. I am, I said truthfully. But before I sign anything, I want to tell you something important. He sat down, trying to hide his anticipation. Your mother used to tell me, I began, that the truest measure of a son isn't how much he inherits, but how much he remembers. So I'll make you a deal. A deal. Yes, I'll sign these papers tomorrow, but only after you do one thing for me. He frowned. What thing? Spend a day here, I said softly. Just one day. Help me clean the garden, fix the fence, eat dinner with me. No business talk, no paperwork. Just be my son for a day. He hesitated, torn between patience and greed. Dad, I've got work. Meetings. Then maybe another time, I said, folding the papers neatly. But no signature until then. He stared at me for a long moment, then forced a smile. Fine, tomorrow I'll clear my schedule. When he left, I exhaled slowly. The plan was set. Maria once said that every storm needs silence before the thunder. Tomorrow would be that silence. And when it ended, he'd finally hear the sound of truth. Morning light spilled through the curtains, soft and forgiving. For a moment, I almost believed the lie I'd built, that today might heal something. But some truths can't be undone. They can only be revealed. Adam arrived early, dressed in casual clothes, sleeves rolled up. It was a small gesture, maybe, to look like a dutiful son. He even brought lunch sandwiches neatly packed. The performance had begun. So he said, looking around, "What do you want to start with?" "The garden," I replied. "It's been neglected lately. The weeds always grow faster than the flowers." He laughed lightly. "Kinda like life, huh?" I smiled faintly. "Exactly." We spent the next hour outside. I watched him move, impatient, mechanical, glancing at his phone every few minutes. He asked if I needed water, if I was tired, but the tone wasn't care. It was calculation, the way a man checks his watch before a meeting. At noon, we sat on the porch, eating in silence. He tried small talk about the economy, interest rates, some startup he was consulting for. I listened, though every word sounded like distance. "You know, Dad," he said, between bites, "you could invest in something like that. Low risk, high return. I could handle the logistics for you." I looked at him, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "Adam," I said finally, "do you know why I asked you to spend today with me?" He shrugged. "Because you're lonely." "Because I wanted to remember," I said, "what it felt like to have a son." The words hit him like a pebble, dropped in still water, small, but rippling deep. He looked away. "That's not fair." "Neither is forgetting your father's birthday," I said softly. He sighed, exasperated. "Dad, we've talked about that." I said I was sorry. I nodded. "You said it. But saying sorry and being sorry are different currencies, son." He leaned back, folding his arms. "You're making this into something it's not. I'm just trying to help." I studied him carefully. "Are you?" The silence between us thickened. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then I asked the question I'd been holding for days. "Adam, if I were gone tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd do?" He blinked, caught off guard. "That's a weird question." "Answer it." He hesitated. "I guess I'd make sure everything was in order. Bill's property, the will." "There," I said, cutting him off gently. "You see it." He frowned. "See what?" "The order of your thoughts." He stared at me, trying to find footing. "You're twisting things." "Am I?" I asked. "Because when your mother died, the first thing I did wasn't look for papers. It was hold her pillow, because it still smelled like her. That's what love remembers first. Not the ledger, not the deed. The scent." He looked down, jaw tight. A flicker of shame crossed his face, and for a brief second I saw the boy who once cried when his mother cut her finger in the kitchen. But it passed. He stood abruptly. "You know what, Dad? Maybe this was a mistake. You want to sit here and guilt me for trying to help, fine. I'll leave you to your nostalgia." I stayed seated, my tone calm. "You can go if you like. But before you do, I have one last thing to show you." He stopped, annoyed. "What now?" I reached into my coat and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed, sealed with his name in Maria's handwriting. His eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "She wrote it before she died," I said. "Told me to give it to you when I thought you'd forgotten what love costs." He took it slowly, suspicious. "What's inside?" "Read it," I said. He tore it open. Inside was a folded note, and a photograph, the three of us standing outside that Oregon house, his little hands covered in paint. He read the first line out loud, voice trembling despite himself. "My dear Adam, if you ever read this, remember that the richest man is the one who remembers who built the roof above him." He stopped, unable to continue. I let the silence sit between us like judgment. Then I stood. "You say you want to help, son. Then start by remembering the roof, not the deed." For the first time, he didn't have an answer. Just a long, broken look that said he wanted to speak but couldn't. When he finally left, he didn't take the envelope. He just set it on the table and walked away. That night, I watched the moon rise and thought of Maria. Maybe the letter had cracked something open. Or maybe it had just confirmed what I already knew. Love without memory becomes inheritance without meaning. Tomorrow I'd find out which one he'd choose. He didn't come the next day, nor the day after. The envelope sat untouched on the table, Maria's handwriting facing the empty chair where Adam had once sat. For a while I let myself believe he was thinking, maybe ashamed, maybe ready to change. But on the third morning, I got my answer. A soft knock on the door. Not from him, from David. Johnny said, stepping inside with a somber face, "We need to talk." My chest tightened. "What happened?" He sighed. "Your son came to my office yesterday. Said you were mentally unfit. He tried to file for emergency control of your assets using that forged medical report again." The words settled in the room like a storm about to break. "Did he succeed?" I asked quietly. "No," David said firmly. "The court requires a full evaluation." "But John, this isn't just greed anymore. It's strategy." I looked at the floor, feeling neither anger nor surprise. "He's playing chess," I murmured. "He just forgot I taught him the game." David's voice softened. "Do you want me to press charges?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He frowned. "You're still protecting him." I met his eyes. "No, I'm letting him finish his story." That night, I sat alone in the study, the rain tapping softly against the window. Maria's photo glowed faintly under the lamplight. I whispered to it, "He's fallen, love. But maybe he needs to hit the ground before he looks up again." I didn't sleep much. Some nights, memories keep you awake, not because they hurt, but because they warn. At dawn, I received a message from Adam. "Dad, can we talk today? I went too far. Please." I stared at it for a long moment, unsure if it was guilt or performance. Maybe both. I texted back, "Come by after dinner." When he arrived, he looked worn, eyes, sunken, voice softer. He hugged me unprompted. It almost fooled me. Almost. "Dad, I made a mistake," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to go to David. I just panicked. I was worried about your health." "And stop," I said quietly. "Don't turn care into currency." He froze. "What?" "You used the concern as a disguise," I said. "You wanted control, not connection." He exhaled sharply. Defensive. "I was just trying to protect what's mine." The words hung there, raw, unfiltered, true. I nodded slowly. There it is. He realized what he'd said, but it was too late. The truth once spoken doesn't return. I walked to the cabinet and took out the decoy folder. Here, I said, if it's what you really want, take it. He stared at it hesitant. What is this? The paper. You've been chasing, I said. All the signatures you wanted. My property. My savings, everything. He looked at me uncertain. You're serious? Completely, I said. If this is what you think love looks like, then I won't stop you from owning it. He took the folder, slowly, eyes flickering between relief and confusion. Dad, I don't understand. You don't have to, I said softly. You just have to live with what you choose. He left without another word. When the door closed, I exhaled not from pain, but from the quiet clarity that comes when you finally stop pretending someone will be who they once were. The house felt heavier that night, but not empty. There's a strange peace in watching the truth arrive, even when it hurts. Later, David called. Did he come? He did, I said. And he took the bait. David sighed. John, are you sure this is the way? I'm sure, I replied. Because sometimes you have to let a man take the wrong key before he learns which doors matter. I walked to the window, watching the rain ease into mist. In the streetlight's reflection, I could see my face in the glass. Older, yes, but steady. Tomorrow the trust would activate. Tomorrow Adam would open that folder and find nothing but one letter written in my own hand. A letter that began with the words, "For the son who remembered the money but forgot the man." And that letter would change everything. Adam called me the next morning. He didn't say hello, just breathed heavily on the other end of the line. Dad, what is this? I didn't answer. I already knew which this he meant. You think this is funny? He continued. All that talk about trust and estate planning, and the folder's empty except for a damn letter. My voice was calm. You read it? Yeah, he snapped. And he stopped himself as if the words were too heavy to finish. I said quietly, then you got your inheritance. He hung up. I didn't need to hear the rest. The silence that followed was the kind that tells you something inside another person has cracked. Not shattered, just cracked enough for light to slip in. I poured coffee, sat by the window, and watched the rain start again. Somewhere across the city, my son was holding a piece of paper that cost him everything he thought he wanted. The letter as written, for the son who remembered the money but forgot the man. I once built a home from wood and sweat. You were 6 holding nails in your tiny hands, asking why we needed so many. I told you, because roofs need faith, not in wood, but in the people standing under it. Years later, I watched you build your own roof of ambition, success, and distance. And when the rain came, you didn't call me inside. You just made it taller. You forgot my birthday, but you remembered my bank. You forgot my stories, but remembered my signature. You forgot me, but only until I was useful again. So here's what I'm leaving you. Not the house, because walls mean nothing when hearts are hollow. Not the money, because wealth without memory becomes debt to your own soul. And not my name, because you've already traded that for comfort. What I leave you instead is the truth. You didn't lose your inheritance today. You lost it the first time you measured love in numbers. But here's the mercy your mother would want me to give. You can still earn it back, not by apology, not by money, by remembering who you were before the world convinced you that kindness was weakness. If you can look at your reflection and see the boy who once brought his mother wildflowers without being told, then the real inheritance will find you. David called later that evening. He came to the office, he said. Didn't say much, just dropped off the letter folded neatly. Then left. Did he seem angry, I asked. David hesitated. No, just hollow. I nodded. That's the beginning. That night, I walked through the house slowly, the same way you walk through a museum of your own mistakes. Every photo, every chair, every corner held a ghost, but none haunted me more than the sound of Maria's laughter echoing faintly in memory. I stood before her picture and said quietly, "He read it, love. He read every word." The storm outside grew louder, but I felt something close to peace. Not joy, just peace. The quiet kind that doesn't celebrate justice, only accepts it. Before going to bed, I wrote one more note for David. David, if he returns, don't turn him away. Let him speak first. If he's come to argue, offer him coffee. If he's come to apologize, offer him silence. Either way, the lesson will land where it must. John. At midnight, I woke to the sound of a car outside. Headlights flashed through the curtains. Then a knock. I opened the door. Adam stood there, soaked, trembling, eyes red. He didn't speak. He just held the letter against his chest like it was something alive. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside and gestured him in. He entered slowly. The way a man enters a church he stopped believing in long ago. And for the first time in years, my son didn't look like a stranger. He looked like a boy who had finally run out of places to hide. He stood there dripping water onto the floor, his breath uneven, eyes searching mine for permission to speak. I didn't offer words, only a slow nod toward the chair by the fire. The clock ticked softly between us, measuring every second of silence. "I read it 3 times, he said. Finally, voice trembling. "The letter." I waited. At first, I thought it was just another lecture. Then I realized you weren't angry. You were tired. I met his eyes, tired of pretending that love survives without truth. He swallowed, glancing down. "You think I don't know what I became?" I know, Dad. I just didn't want to admit it." I leaned back, the firelight dancing across the walls. "Then admit it now." He hesitated. The rain outside deepened, tapping the windows like an audience leaning closer. "I was scared," he said softly. "After Mom died, I watched you fade. I thought if I worked hard enough, earned enough, I could fill that hole. But every time I called you, just sounded smaller. And I didn't know how to fix that. So I avoided it. I told myself I'd come back when I had more to give. But by then," his voice cracked. "By then, I'd forgotten what giving even meant." I didn't interrupt. Sometimes a confession only survives if you don't touch it. After a long silence, I said, "You thought money could heal what absence created." He nodded weakly. And when that didn't work, I tried to control. I thought if I managed everything I could, I don't know, keep you safe. Safe from what? He looked at me, tears forming. From dying, from being alone, from me. The fire popped quietly, as if punctuating the truth. I stood and walked to the window, staring into the rain. Do you know what I wished for on my birthday, Adam? He shook his head. That you'd calm me. Not for advice, not for money, just to say, "Hi, Dad." That's all I wanted. He buried his face in his hands. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I turned to him. I know, but don't apologize for the symptom. Understand the cause. He frowned through the tears. What do you mean? Your mother used to say a man can't hold what he doesn't name. You called it success. You called it responsibility. But what you were holding was fear. The fear that love makes you weak. That's why you forgot me. He stared at me, realization spreading like dawn. For the first time, I saw the pride leave his posture, and the boy return. The boy who used to draw crooked birthday cards and sneak frosting off the cake when his mother wasn't looking. I don't know if I can fix this, he whispered. You can't, I said gently. But you can remember. And remembering is how love breathes again. He stood trembling. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't earned, I replied. It's recognized. Like rain, it falls, whether you think you deserve it or not. He took a step closer, unsure, waiting for rejection. I opened my arms. He hesitated only a second before falling into them. His body shook the way mine once did at his mother's funeral. We stood there, two men, bound not by blood, but by the ruins of what they finally dared to rebuild. The rain softened, the fire dimmed. After a while, he whispered, "What happens now?" Now, I said quietly, you start remembering. You start showing up. You learn how to live without owing. He nodded, wiping his eyes. And you? I smiled faintly. I already did. When he left later that night, he didn't take the car. He walked slowly through the rain. No folder, no argument, just silence. I watched from the window until he disappeared down the street. Then I whispered, "Good night, son." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. The silence finally felt full. The rain stopped some time before dawn. When I woke, the world outside was washed clean, the kind of morning that feels too quiet to belong to reality. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to the soft hum of stillness. No ticking clock, no dripping faucet, only the faint sound of wind brushing against the trees as if even the earth was trying to breathe again. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped out to the porch. The wood beneath my feet was damp, glistening in the pale gold light. The garden still smelled of rain, that soft, earthy scent that reminds you some things can be broken and yet still bloom again. Across the yard, the soil shimmered. Tiny droplets hung on every blade of grass, catching the sun like tiny shards of forgiveness. I sat down in the old wicker chair, the one Maria used to call our quiet seat. For years, That chair held her laughter, her sighs, and the sound of her spoon stirring sugar into coffee she never quite finished. Beside me on the small table was her framed photo, her smile frozen in a moment that still hurt to remember. Next to it lay the letter Adam had left behind at David's office. A single page folded carefully. One sentence in his handwriting. "I remember the roof, Dad." I read it once more, just that line. And I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not sadness, but something in between. The kind of ache that isn't pain anymore, just proof that something once mattered deeply. For a long time I stared at the horizon. The sky was changing from gold to silver, from warmth to clarity. The light crawled slowly across the wet floorboard, spilling over Maria's photo, over my hands, over the empty chair beside me. And I thought, maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not erasing, but learning how to sit beside the empty chair without flinching. I had spent years believing inheritance was something I had to protect: money, property, the measurable proof of a life's work. But now, in this silence, I understood all those things were just shadows of what we truly leave behind. The real inheritance is what remains in the quiet, the tone of our voice. When we forgive the memory of the hands that raised us, the scent of a house that once held love, the kind of things you can't pass down in writing, but that still echo in the hearts of those who choose to remember. Adam hadn't called since that night. I didn't expect him to. Redemption doesn't arrive with words. It grows in the soil of silence, watered by time. He needed that silence more than I needed an apology. Because silence, when you finally face it, becomes the teacher you can't argue with. I took a slow sip of coffee. The warmth traveled through me like sunlight. It was the first morning in years that didn't feel heavy. No weight of resentment, no echo of anger, only a strange kind of peace that didn't ask for permission. Maria used to say, "Love isn't what survives after we die, John. It's what stays quiet enough to be remembered." And she was right. When I looked back inside through the window, I saw the house differently. It wasn't empty. It was honest. The walls didn't echo with what was missing anymore. They just stood steady and silent, like they finally understood their purpose. David came by later that morning, as he often did after storms. He didn't say much, just brought 2 coffees and sat beside me. He left that note he asked gently. I nodded. "Just one line?" "Do you think he meant it?" "I think he finally understood it," I said. We sat there for a while, watching the light shift across the yard. Then David said something I'll never forget. "You know, John, not everyone gets to witness their legacy while they're still alive." I smiled, faintly. Maybe that's the blessing of age, seeing what still grows from what's been broken. He nodded, and we didn't speak again for a long time. When he left, I stayed on the porch. The air was still cool, but the light had softened into silver, the color of acceptance. The garden hummed quietly with life. Somewhere a bird called its song, thin but certain. I thought of Adam as a child again, small hands covered in dirt, laughing as he tried to plant seeds upside down. I remembered how I taught him to fix a leaky roof, to hold a hammer steady, to measure twice before cutting once. Back then I thought I was teaching him how to build things. Now I know I was teaching him how to rebuild himself someday. And maybe that day had finally come. I reached for Maria's photo, brushed the dust from the glass. "He's trying," I whispered. "You'd be proud of him." The wind carried the words away gently, not to erase them, but to deliver them. As the sun rose higher, the shadows began to fade. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet hum of the world, to the faint rustle of leaves, to the silence that no longer felt like absence. Because this silence, this still golden space, was mine now. It wasn't punishment, it was peace. People think inheritance is wealth, but wealth fades when the hands that gave it are gone. True inheritance is the memory that refuses to die, the values that whisper when the world forgets to listen. My son will carry that silence now, just as I carry his mother's laughter. And maybe someday when the rain returns, he'll sit where I sit, coffee in hand, and understand. Love doesn't end when someone forgets you. It ends when you forget who you are. And I remember